Welcome to Smart Venture Podcast Sponsor Spotlight, where we shine a light on companies and brands that support our show. Today, we're honored to feature Pair Networks in our Sponsor Spotlight. Pair Networks is a leader in web hosting. We're excited to share more about what they do and how they make a difference. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into Pair Networks Sponsor Spotlight. Hi, Melea and Matt. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Hello.
Hi, thank you for having us.
First of all, I have to keep mentioning about the snack situation. So I went to this podcasting conference and then Pair has a booth in there. And then I was first and the last person stay at the snack table the 3 whole days throughout the conference. I have to shamefully admit that at the beginning, it was definitely the snack attract me to the booth. And then I started talking to Jordan, and then there are another 2 ladies who are sitting there. I realized Pair is such a great brand and then a great company that in Pittsburgh rated as one of the top places to work at, as well as people were working there for over 10 years. And I feel like it's really hard to imagine myself doing anything for 10 years. Overall, I just feel like this brand has a great vibe. And as well as I heard that you guys are hosting all these great snack brands websites, which is totally amazing. So today I have to have you guys on the show to share the story with us. I want to learn more about how you guys got involved with Pair, what were you doing before, and what is Pair.com in general? Although I know now, but I definitely want to hear from you. So
yeah, first of all, thank you so much for inviting us to talk with you. And yes, the snacks that we had were amazing snacks. they definitely worked for us. And the snacks that we were giving away at that conference are all brands that trust Pair Networks. And so it was really great for us to, one, be able to support brands that support Pair, but then just sharing with people the companies that we work with. And it was fun. It was great. And apparently it worked. So that's awesome.
So you guys are a couple and then you guys are COO and CTO. You guys met in this company?
Yes. Yeah, we did. We worked together for 12 years before we dated and then eventually married. Yeah. So I think that probably made it easier to figure out how to work with a spouse, being that we had that working relationship first, and that was pretty well established. But I think it was a little scary in some ways. Our whole household is very invested
in the company.
Yeah. And, all the things I think a lot of couples that work together worry about, work-life balance, being able to have couple time and work time and that separation and being able to not let work life leak too much into personal life. But I think because we were so good at that and had a good working relationship before, that it just kind of very naturally worked. So
I'm curious, when you guys joined Pair, how big was the company and then how big is the company now?
When I joined, I was the 4th technical employee ever hired back in 1997. So the whole Pair of Pair Networks was located in a single room, not much bigger than the little room we're sitting in now. All the servers were in there and I sat in there. And on days when the air conditioner was working really well, sometimes I had a hard time typing because my fingers were too cold. And on days when the air conditioner was acting up, it got quite hot. Yeah, we've come quite a long way.
I was wondering, so when you guys joined the company, you joined as a 4th employee. What about Melea?
So I came just 3 years later, and the difference between his experience starting and mine was already very different, but it's already a completely different company than from the time I started. Mm-hmm. There were about 20 people there, and we had just moved into the current location that we're still in to this day. Much larger footprint, multiple data centers in our office space, separate data centers. People are not sitting next to computers with air conditioning pouring over them. So it was a lot different. I had been scouted from a different ISP, a local ISP, to come aboard and build up our customer service groups. At the time, the company was making a leap to becoming a domain registrar and expanding services to kind of grow to the next level. Mm-hmm. And in order to do that, they needed to have a more formalized support approach. They needed 24/7 phone support. At that time I joined, It was, a group of 20 or so people all chipping in, doing a little bit of everything whenever they could. And so that was my job coming in. And my first year, we doubled in size to about 40. That was the start of, I think, things really expanding. It was a wild time to be there. It was really incredible. It's kind of amazing to reflect back on, really. Yeah.
Yeah, so you mentioned basically like a year after you came, like the company doubled its size. Like since I live in Silicon Valley, I feel like every company is like, we're so growth driven, but it sounds like although Pear has grew like a lot that year, I'm just curious, like how do you maintain your company culture to be like really friendly as well as like really, there's like people work there for like over 10 years. Like how do you create those kind of environment?
I guess the best way to explain it is, well, first, it all started with our founder, Kevin Martin, and the culture he set up front, where the work was the work. When we were doing the work, everything was serious. But outside of the work, we didn't have to take ourselves so seriously. We weren't wearing suits and ties or even business casual. As long as the work got done, we were allowed to be more relaxed. But as you noted, we have a lot of long-term employees. So there's a continuity to our culture that sort of becomes self-fulfilling after a while. And we've got so many long-term employees, and then a new person shows up, and in what feels like the blink of an eye to me, that person is suddenly a 5-year employee themselves, and then more people are coming in, and they're the ones sort of passing along. We have a lot of what I would call oral traditions passed down, amongst the staff. And honestly, I think we've just hired really well. So we have a large group of people that work really well together.
Yeah, I'm curious. So when the company started, you joined as the number 4 technical staff, and then Melea joined in the customer support. Now you guys are like leading the company. What were some like career journey that you've experienced throughout this time?
A lot of our roots, and even still, it feels like sometimes we're a bit like a startup, but it was definitely a startup culture back then. So there was definitely a lot of wearing of multiple hats. So I was brought in to build and grow support teams, and I had experience in doing operations and support, a technical background for sure, but then more of the administrative and business side that I had not had as much experience in. Definitely HR. I did not expect to be wearing an HR hat for a number of years, and that was interesting and enlightening, but they were all the details that were important, that were maybe not the most exciting part of the job, but because we invested in doing them the right way, I think it paid in dividends later. So I think those would be the biggest things. HR doesn't sound like the most exciting thing to have to drill down and learn and figure out, but it was, again, part of the philosophy of the company, in how they viewed HR is maybe a little bit different than a lot of companies do traditionally. It was definitely a resource to the staff, making sure that we were doing things in a way that kept them happy, motivated, engaged, helped them grow. So it fit with what I was doing, but it was unexpected.
Yeah, I'm curious. So at the beginning, is a core service web hosting, and then so now I feel like on the service there was website building. You guys collaborated with Weebly, WordPress. Now you guys are acquired by Libsyn. When did the different product offerings start happening? How do you guys build these kind of relationships with the other partnerships or the acquisition?
Of course, when we started, we did websites and email. Those were the 2 core services. Well, in the earliest days, email was sort of considered more of a throw-in, but it quickly became, maybe the killer app of the 2 out of website hosting and email. And we started there, and then, shortly after the turn of the millennium, in those days, if you wanted a domain name, if you wanted yourname.com, there was literally one person that had the US government contract to issue that to you, and they had the monopoly. And when that was broken up and the chance opened up to sell our own domain names for ourselves, basically everybody in our industry jumped on that. So that was our first big diversification, adding domain names. And that was the thing, we could mostly build ourselves, but you can't build everything yourself necessarily, and that's how I'd say we moved into things more like partnering with Weebly. We needed a solution for our customers to let them, do drag and drop website building. We could build and maintain our own, or we could find a strong one that we could partner with and concentrate on the hosting of those websites, which is still our core competency. Let them concentrate on the intricacies of building a website builder. With WordPress, it's for now the dominant platform on the internet. I don't assume it will be forever, because there was always a next big thing, but it's stayed on top pretty long. So that's the thing, obviously, we've been working and building on, and trying to focus to make things easier for smaller and more niche audiences, like with podcast websites, targeting podcasters. But that is a theory that can be replicated across hundreds of niches, finding out what exactly a website for this particular person needs to have, and working to provide that through them. And WordPress is a really good foundation to start with for that.
Yeah, so I'm actually really curious about, like, for example, let's say like if I select like a hosting website, or I selecting like a hosting service, I didn't even realize like hosting and domain name are like separate technically. So I'm curious, like, what is the behind the scene? You mentioned the hosting company or the domain name company have to go to the government and then purchase these rights. How does it work behind the scene?
There's an organization called ICAAN, that was set up originally by the US government, but I think it's been handed off internationally now, that basically has given out the rights to they're called TLDs. .com is a TLD.net, and now there are hundreds of them. Mm-hmm. And ICANN supervised handing those out to individual companies. They're called registries. So there's the .com registry, which is owned by VeriSign. And then people like Pair Networks doing business as Pair Domains were called registrars. So we contract with all these registries. Basically, they offer us a wholesale price. So we contract with VeriSign. So you can come to us, or GoDaddy, or anybody else who sells them, and say, I want mycoolpodcastdomain.com. And if it's available in our systems, we're speaking to VeriSign and basically buying it from them wholesale, and then providing it to you with a bunch of add-on services like name servers so that it actually can answer, or we do things like email forwarding, or if you just want like a simple like domain name that forwards to another website, you can just do that directly in Pair Domains. And that's basically where it's all happening, because everybody is wholesaling the same exact product, and then you're building add-on services around it to make your offering more attractive.
So for example, so like right now when you're like signing up with Pair or like any other company, like you essentially just purchase a domain, and then like I feel like the hosting just like come with it instead of like the other way around. So back in time, I remember there was like a different company that you had to sign up for to get the domain. What exactly does hosting mean?
To be honest, it's a question I sometimes struggle to answer, which is my own failing. Like, it turns out that after 25 years of working in a very, very technical industry, I sometimes think I'm being not technical, but instead I'm just being less technical and people don't know what I'm talking about. But at its very simplest, if you're sitting there at your computer and you go to a web browser and you type in google.com, that request goes out onto the internet, and somewhere there is a server that is basically just a computer also that has that website on it, that receives the request, answers, and sends back the web page to you. So it's, servers are just computers. And so, you send the request and it is routed over the internet to the server that has the web page, and they send the web page back. Well, those servers that hold the web pages and respond to requests and send them back, that is what we offer. Basically, we have data centers full of servers that are capable of serving up your web page and large redundant internet connections to make sure it's fast and stays up.
When you mentioned about the air conditioning situation, like was it because of the data center instead of the office, or like how does it?
But our very first office was a spare room in the back of a lawyer's office, but the lawyer was mostly retired, so he was never there. And what was done before I worked there, I did not destroy any property, is a hole was literally cut into the floor. And there was a big air conditioning unit in the basement, and a hole was cut in the floor, and the hose, the vent, was hooked up to that. So that was the air conditioning blowing into the office. And when it worked, it was really, really cold in there. But the unit down in the basement would freeze up. So if you came in and it was really warm, you go down to the basement and the big air conditioner would be covered with ice. And you'd basically have to open the doors to the outside and let it thaw out a little bit, and then things would cool off again. But, it's not like that anymore. We have specialized, multiple redundant, like 30-ton air conditioning units that sit in the data center and distribute air around.
This all starts from the early days. You have our founder who had this business idea, and in the early days, was just running this in this rented space to see if this had legs. Was this going to be a legitimate thing? And yeah, it's so like it didn't take long for him to go from being in a lawyer's office pumping air conditioning from a basement to having a dedicated office space with multiple data centers.
The year after I started, we moved to a bigger space with our first dedicated server room. And then it was less than 2 years after that we had already filled that up. And that's when we moved to our current building in the south side of Pittsburgh that gave us basically all the room to grow that we would need.
I think it was more of a sign of the times, just that, who knew what a data center was in 1996, 1997? That was still a pretty, early idea, where, now you can lease space in a data center in almost every city in the US, with multiple options. So it's incredible.
Okay, so I have two questions in mind. So one is, so when you guys like growing like really fast, right? Like you mentioned, like from the basement data center situation, and then like a year later, you guys are having like an office, and then there was like a bunch of data center, well, not data center, but like data machines in actual space, right? Like, so that means like the business was growing. So he tested out this idea was working. How did you guys get the first batch of clients? Are they podcasters? Are they like artists? I saw that like there was like 9 years ago, there was a people playing jazz using this website. And then as well as like, we previously mentioned about, there was tons of like snack companies. Those are like well-known snack companies that have eaten their snacks before, like a long time ago. Curious, like how do you guys get these clients? And then like, is there like a specific sector that you guys were targeting when you guys first started?
I mean, all of it in the early days was 100% accidental. Not accidental, I don't want to say that, but there were so few hosting companies out there. It was all word of mouth. Definitely early on, we were establishing a reputation for being reliable, accessible, well-priced, all the things that people were looking for in the late 90s for a web hosting company. But I mean, think back, like if you're old enough to think back, who was looking for a website in the late 90s, right? Like very few people. Yeah. So, it was a smaller market, but you didn't see .com on every sign or product, or, it's so ingrained in everything and how everybody does business now, but that was really not the case back then. In our early days, it was absolutely word of mouth, but then also we had a lot of larger clients, resellers, design firms, people that were just starting to establish their own businesses, serving people looking for building a website for their brand. And this was a time where podcasting hadn't even started yet. That came some years later, not too far later, but definitely later.
So when you guys first started the hosting service, like, do you think, like, as you mentioned, like people were probably starting waitlist websites and everything. How do you have to, like, I wouldn't say convince, but like, how do you kind of like making sure that they know what's going on? And then like, how do you kind of like educate the market back then? In
the earliest days, our clients were a larger percentage of our clients were very technically oriented. They were sort of people like us. And that's a thing that's been changing steadily over time for the last quarter century. Because when we started, it was a time when you could just walk up to somebody and try to talk to them about your webpage, and they would have no idea what you were talking about. I mean, to some degree, we sort of rode along with the pop culture wave as people became aware of just what the web was, and everybody thought they were going to get rich. So I was one of those. Before I was a pair employee, I was a pair customer. I was gonna make my websites and make millions of dollars. And instead, I ended up administering the websites, and I'm not complaining at all. I love what I do. I found my home in more ways than one right out of college, which is especially fortunate. Yeah, in the earliest days, again, there weren't that many choices. So anybody who was looking for a web page could kind of look at all the choices, just about. And we were just a better built service than a lot of them. And I believe, before Pair Networks was started, our founder, Kevin Martin, was a guy looking to create a web page and looking around, see where he could host this web page. And when he saw it was out there, he decided that I think I could do this better. So that's what he decided to do. He set up shop and set it up better. But I believe in the process of doing that, he was out in early internet forums and things talking to people about website hosting, and he met a lot of people who basically interested in what he was talking about doing. So when he finally launched, he had a list of, a few hundred people who had said, hey, if you really build this, let me know, I'll come check it out. So in some ways, by being one of those people, he started with, a group of people who were interested in seeing him succeed and to build something better.
That's really interesting. Like, did he taught himself like how to code, and then like how do you guys really start it? Because I feel like at that point, internet is like the new thing. How many people even know how to code, like, or even have a computer back then? And like, how did he kind of like put together this team to like kind of build this?
Yeah.
He was a programmer. He worked for Stern Pinball, actually working on pinball, the code for pinball machines for a while before and he worked at Carnegie Mellon University also. And in terms of his first couple of employees, I mean, like his first employee was somebody he knew from Carnegie Mellon. And I think the next two were people that person knew. And I was sort of the first outsider of sorts who nobody knew in advance. And to be honest, I probably owe my entire career to what turned out to be a fortuitous decision to not only email my resume, but send it in via postal mail. Because after I got hired, one of my first jobs was to go through and clean up some mailboxes that had mail that hadn't been answered for weeks because they were too busy. So they were concentrating on current paying customers, and people who were prospective customers weren't getting answers. But also there was a mailbox where all the emailed resumes went to, and I found mine unopened in the mailbox. So very untechnical, process that I actually got my job by. But we were all, computer science nerds, basically. In the early days, I mean, again, I didn't know what the internet was till I got to the University of Pittsburgh and got my first internet connection and my space from my first web page, where my URL was www.pitt.edu/MPRSD6. Which is why, I needed to figure out my own domain name and find my own hosting service, which is what led me to Pair in the first place. I'm not a big prognosticator, and I can't say that I'm good with predictions, but it was the future. The moment I saw the World Wide Web, it just screamed, this is the future. And I knew it was where I wanted to be. And I think we all felt that way. I think we all still kind of feel that way. And that's one of the reasons why we all work so well together.
Is like the majority employee base of Pair Network in Pittsburgh? So for example, right now, I feel like most companies have some sort of people in different places, and people are hiring from overseas, or just curious, is everybody still in Pittsburgh? And then how do you guys hire the folks in the company now?
So I would say we're about 85-90% in Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
The past few years have both forced us and taught us to be a little more virtual in our operations, where we were very used to just working alongside each other. So for a tech company, we were all working out of an office and right next to each other in person. We have had key people over the years that have relocated out of the Pittsburgh area, and we've kept them on board. Mm-hmm. And when everything changed a few years ago, we realized hey, we're doing this okay. Mm-hmm. If we were to make this a better way to grow our skills and our talent pool, we could do it. We've spent a lot of time in the past 2 years with hiring efforts and training efforts, making sure that the people that we're bringing in that are outside of the Pittsburgh market are feeling like they're part of our culture and our understanding how we operate, and that we're maintaining what we do and we're doing it well. So it's worked so far, but it feels like we're still in the middle of that process. Mm-hmm. But hopefully just being mindful of what's important to us and our values as a company is translating well to those new hires. And then honestly, we do have people that we've hired in the Pittsburgh market that we haven't even met in person because we've been working remotely for the past few years now. So no difference really whether you're in Nebraska or Pittsburgh, it's all the same.
What do you think is the core company culture that sustained throughout all these years?
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know. I mean, it's just a very employee focused company. We recognize that our people are our biggest differentiator. That's what we're selling really is that. And so when we are hiring, we keep that in mind. We're looking for the people that are driven, invested, that will just fit with that culture, that same work ethic. But we're also very big on like work-life balance, and I don't know, just seeing people as people. There have been different parts to our culture that we've been very protective of, in that they're difficult to make sure we can grow and scale, but still keep those parts of it. Like in some ways, we're kind of a flat organization. I mean, we have our org chart and we have, managers and levels of management within, but we're all very accessible. We all have an open door policy. We all work well to each other. There's no reason somebody that's an entry level staff member can't reach out to a senior developer and ask a question. That's part of who we are. It's hard to explain to people. And sometimes when we've had people move and grow outside of the organization, which we also encourage, you can talk to them and see how they get maybe a little used to how we've done things over the years, that it's a little harder when you move to, say, like a bigger organization that has a lot more levels of management. It can feel a little bureaucratic at times for them, and they're not used to that. But, we're just a little more connected that way, and it's helped. It's such a small thing, but just being accessible and communicating with each other, it just makes such a huge difference.
Yeah. I think being nice, and as well as keeping the organization flat, is definitely something really important. And also I feel like that's what kind of culture Silicon Valley is trying to adapt into the tech ecosystem. I also feel like you mentioned employee focus. That's super interesting, because I'm about to interview this Amazon executive. So they were literally talking about customer focus. So a lot of these bigger companies talk about we focus on the customer, we focus on the customer experience. And I think focusing on the employees is super popular in the hospitality business. So for example, when I was in grad school, the CEO or president of Marriott came in, and then basically he was talking about being employee focused. Because if you're treating your employees right, and then the employees will treat the customer right, which is totally resonating with the idea here. I'm curious, when you guys think about Pair moving forwards, now you guys are partnered with Libsyn. Are you guys going to offering more product and services towards the podcast? And I saw that there was podcast website building on the website. What are some different products or customer services you guys are planning on implementing in the future?
So definitely growing the podcast websites service that we've been developing. We're really excited about that one. We've been working on that product for some time, and I'm stumbling here because I'm well, what can I say about it now? I feel like it's been really cool to bring what we're passionate about with web hosting and the back end architecture of that, and making sure that we're backing it up with our support. We're finding that a lot of podcasters are subject matter experts on their podcast, but they're not ready to be web developers, webmasters, web designers, but they definitely need that to promote their show, their brand, whatever it is they're doing. So we're trying to bring in more tools that make the experience of creating a website easier for them, so they can focus on their show, their brand, whatever they're doing. And so we've got a few things in the works with that. The podcast websites service that we do have now, I think the coolest thing about it is that it will work with your podcast feed and automatically update your site every time you publish a show. So every time you hit that publish button and a show goes out on your feed, it's automatically creating a post to your website, and you didn't have to do anything. Your website's just off there running automatically. You didn't have to go sync, hit another button, go log in over there. It's just done. So we're just going to keep developing more and more resources for podcasters that are built around that service. I think there's going to be some really great things. Being part of the Libsyn universe now has given us access to podcasters, their feedback, what they find important, and it's really been helpful for us to develop that service, making sure that that we're doing something that they're going to love.
Yeah, totally. So like, I think one thing that I find really great is like you guys have 24 hours services. So like the customer service will be located in Pittsburgh, and then they will be like answering calls for people about their questions on hosting. And what do you feel like sets Pair apart from the competition?
It's the support. I mean,
it's our people. I always say the people make Pair. As you said, like you can call us up at 3 o'clock in the morning in whatever time zone you're in, and somebody will be there and answer the phone. And it won't just be like an outsourced night shift that basically takes some notes and leaves them for somebody in the morning. It'll be somebody who can talk you through your problem. And if you need your handheld to walk you through setting up your email client at 3:30 in the morning because you just got a new laptop and you can't wait. There will be somebody there who can do that. And if it's something that they need more help with, they need to talk to a network administrator, a systems administrator. We don't have silos, as she was saying earlier. Like they can go, they don't say, well, I'm going to put in a request with network, and when they get back to me, they can just go virtually or otherwise, mostly virtually right now, go and talk to the people they need to talk to, get done what needs done, get the answers they need.
I mean, it might be boring details here, but a lot of how we run our support teams is we're really big on cross-training. Not only does it help the customer experience, so when they're talking to our support agents, there's a good chance that person can answer a pretty wide range of issues, but it's also been really nice for employee development in that, I mean, web hosting and domain services, there's such a broad spectrum of things that we're helping people with, everything from setting up a new website, new services, the domain name, all the way up to a dedicated server that, maybe they're hosting an app, maybe they have multiple dedicated servers that are load balanced to handle a very high traffic website or, commerce solution. But we're doing all of that, anything and everything in between, plus security. Like there's a lot of things that our support teams have to be knowledgeable about. And through cross-training, a lot of times people find certain areas they're most excited about or interested in. And we definitely encourage and develop that so they can kind of grow their own resume or experiences towards the things that they care most about. And then for us, that's great because we're building skills in-house of something that we definitely need. It's just a bit of how we're doing it.
As we mentioned at the beginning, there are a lot of great snack brands are using Pair for hosting. Can we talk about them on the podcast?
Sure. I mean, when we were at the conferences, the past few conferences we've been to, we've been sharing different brands that we host, Enlightened Foods, and Lenny and Larry cookies. I love their stuff myself.
Same.
Enlightened, that includes the Cloud 10 bars. Those are the marshmallow crispy treat protein bars, and Bada Bean. Those things are awesome. Those are the crunchy broad bean snacks with all the different flavorings. I am in love. They have I think it's a honey sriracha one that's really
it's amazing.
Yeah.
Sorry, but I have to talk about this.
Yeah, and it's funny because we talk about this all the time. There are so many different brands that host with Pair Networks that it's a regular thing to encounter a company that we're interacting with personally, and then we realize, oh, wait a minute, they host with us. That's awesome. It just happened to us at the grocery store last weekend. Idaho Potato, different mashed potato cups that he was putting into our cart. Hey, that's our customer, by the way. So it's fun. It's neat sometimes to realize
you're using some stuff that you're interacting with. I'm curious, what is the difference between hosting a larger brands, for example, Lenny and Larry, which I assume is gigantic probably, since I feel protein cookies are everywhere. What is the difference between hosting the solopreneur versus a bigger company like Lenny and Larry's?
Sometimes it's not a whole lot. I mean, it all depends, right? It's so hard to say. So some brands are doing very custom websites. If it's customized in some way, you might want to put that in as a host environment, like a VPS or a dedicated server where you do a more customized hosting environment to support whatever they might be running. Sometimes it's traffic. You just want to make sure that you're in a hosting environment where you can handle the amount of traffic that you need. Some larger customers of ours, they want to do load balancing. So, they have multiple servers so that they can maintain 24/7, like no interruption, not, they always just need to be on. It could depend on something like that. It's all kinds of different things. Usually it's just what you want to run, what you're doing on your website, and the amount of traffic. We have people that are doing very customized things on dedicated servers that don't get a lot of traffic. It's maybe like an internal development solution for a corporation. It's not getting a lot of traffic. It's maybe for a team of 100 people, but it just needs to be in that environment for whatever they're running. Or it could be a high traffic site and they're maybe running it on a shared server. It just depends. Like it's anything and everything. It's really wild.
Do they have to actually work with a team of yours, or do they have to pay more because they need more services? I'm also curious. I know that you guys hosted the Alabama campaign previously. When you guys are hosting these kind of giant traffic events, what do you need to do on your end to power through this kind of things?
For us, we've always had the bandwidth for it.
First, you have to make sure, obviously, you have a big enough internet connection to host the sites, but high-profile sites like that also basically provoke people who don't like that person to attack their website. So you have to be ready. You have to be ready both, watching the security of that server, watching for people trying to break into it, but also you're familiar with DDoS, distributed denial of service attacks, where people take their nets of thousands or tens of thousands or even millions of compromised machines and tell them all, go to this website right now and try to overwhelm it and crash it with traffic. That's a cat and mouse game that'll be played out for the rest of my career at least. You basically, you have to be on your toes. You have to be monitoring traffic levels, looking for anomalies, looking for spikes. And we have a dedicated security team who handles all of that, working full time on our defenses, installing things on the servers to watch for problems and also to clean up after anything that does happen.
Yeah, I've always wondered what would happen if hackers or something trying to attack someone's website, and then when you're purchasing a website or the hosting service, typically they ask you, hey, do you want us to protect your identity? If you want us to protect your identity, you click this, so it's secure, and then you basically have an add-on fee or something. What does that even mean for a regular person like myself?
Yeah, there's two different things there. So on the domain registration side, there's often domain privacy, and because domain records are generally, it's a public record, so you can look up who owns a domain name and who is that contact. A lot of times, third parties were looking those up and using it for any and all reasons, right? Sending us spam or junk mail or whatever it might be, but then also maybe more malicious reasons. So there's sometimes a good reason to block the ownership, the contact information of who owns a domain name to that general public record lookup. And so that domain privacy piece is one. And that is something we've been doing at Pair Domains for no additional cost for quite some time. Yeah, so there's that part of it, but then the securing of a website, that has been something that has just it's just a service we do now, and it's so wild to look back on how that has happened over the years. But the popularity of different CMSs like WordPress, Joomla, Drupal, but WordPress definitely being the most popular out there, it puts a big target on its back, right? If you know what percent, over 60% of all websites on the internet now are hosted on a WordPress platform. So as a hacker, if you know how to compromise a WordPress vulnerability, you have a really big pool of websites to attack, right? The popularity of it makes it. So we definitely spend a lot of time helping customers secure WordPress and then also doing our own preventative measures. the things that we're doing on server to protect them for sure. But then as customers are doing their own custom plugins, themes, different things with WordPress, there's definitely a piece of that where they have to make sure that they're doing best practices, they're keeping their software, their themes, all those things up to date, and making sure that it's locked down from any kind of bug or hack that might be released.
For sure. So I have two ending questions. One is like, nowadays, like all these crypto company or like all these crypto domains, right? Like unstable domain or like there's like ENS. And so I'm curious, like, are you guys planning on tapping into that area? So for example, the blood.xyz or blood.eth or blood.dao or something, like, are you guys planning on doing something crypto related hosting?
For domain extensions, like we are always looking at what our different partners are offering and, making good business decisions. Is there a need there? Do customers want this? Is the pricing right? Like, absolutely. But beyond that, I don't know.
We don't have anything specifically aimed at that, but we certainly, our services, particularly our dedicated servers, the virtual private servers, are good platforms on which a customer who is looking to build their own crypto application could build it on our services. But we don't have anything specifically that we've pre-built for them. But we can certainly power, a secure operating system and a server on which you can build that.
Yeah. So is there anything even different if you're building like a crypto related app to the traditional server that you use for like a regular app versus like the crypto thing?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
It's all you're writing computer code to run on a server. It's just the crypto apps obviously place a premium on encryption of things, but you should really be doing that in any app that you're building these days. So
I know that we have a lot of great snack brand and now a lot of like entrepreneurs and musicians and artists, and now a lot of like podcasters like myself. Like, have you guys what is like a most like notable brand, like for example, like a tech company or like a like another company that's like not in like the artist space that you guys feel like it's like a really great company that uses Pair?
Oh, there are so many. In part, like some of the brands that host with us, they're hosting with us because we have large design firms that secure these clients. So some of these are companies that might not even realize they're hosting at Pair Networks, but they've contracted with a designer developer that does work with our services. But we have a lot of large brands that host various projects or development pieces. We have a lot of higher education institutes. We have, I believe it's Disney Research.
I was going to say Disney Research also. Adobe, I don't know if they still do, but some working groups within Adobe have hosted their particular websites.
One of their apps, yeah. And then
MIT used to host their admissions blog with us.
They still do.
Okay.
Urban Outfitters.
For a while, we were hosting Jaguar, the car companies, like a particular site for a new vehicle.
Yeah, we have, creators, authors. It's anybody and everybody. It's really wild.
Well, thank you guys so much for sharing with me, because I feel like those are great companies, definitely super impressive and super trustworthy. I really love overall just like the vibe of the company. I feel like it's really just like home-ish. As mentioned previously, I feel like it's like you are hosted by like trusted people, and then like people will like take care of your needs than like you're talking to a third party or a bot chatting with them online or something. So I definitely feel like this is why I feel like this is a great service to consider when you're thinking about hosting your website and purchasing a website domain.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.